When his grandfather passed, Daniel inherited the old lake cabin. It wasn't much, one story, drafty in the winter, built back when insulation meant more wood. But it was quiet, peaceful, or so he thought. He moved in that fall. The air smelled like wet pine, and the lake behind the house looked like black glass at night. He'd stand on the back porch with a beer, listening to crickets and the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface. For the first month, it was perfect. No neighbors for a mile, no traffic, no city noise. Then he started hearing it. The first time was around 2 a.m. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch and woke to a sound like someone slowly dragging a shovel through mud outside. Long, wet scrapes, pauses between them, as if whoever was making them was listening for something. He sat up and held his breath. The sound stopped. The next morning, he checked the shore. There was a trench in the mud, about 4 inches deep, starting from the tree line and ending at the water's edge. No footprints, just that strange, solitary groove. After that, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching the cabin at night. He kept the curtains closed, but the dragging sound came back, always starting in the woods and moving toward the water, always stopping if he got too close to the windows. One night in December, he saw it. Daniel woke to the sound again, this time closer, right outside the porch. He crept to the back door and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see. Something stood in the frost-covered yard, backlit by the moon. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with limbs too long for its body. Its skin hung in loose folds, stretched over the wrong frame. In one hand it held not a stick, but a long, pale spine. The sound Daniel had heard was it dragging the tip of that bone through the frozen dirt. Its head, it didn't have a face in the human sense, just a long vertical slit opening and closing like gills. When he shifted his weight, the creature's head snapped toward him, the slit widening to reveal rows of needle-thin teeth. Then it turned and walked straight into the lake, the water swallowing it whole. Daniel tried convincing himself it was a dream, but the trenches in the mud appeared more frequently, always closer to the cabin. Then came the night it changed. He woke to the dragging sound again, but this time it didn't stop. It circled the cabin once, twice, then stopped at the door. The porch creaked. A sharp tapping began. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. Waiting. Daniel gripped a kitchen knife and stayed awake until dawn. When he finally stepped outside, frost covered the porch except for one patch where something had stood. The boards there were slick, with a gelatinous substance that smelled faintly of blood. The next night it returned. He heard it pacing the walls, its claws tracing the siding, testing the structure. When it reached the front, the knocking started again, heavier this time. Then a wet, rhythmic drag down the door, as if marking it. Daniel thought about retreating to the bedroom, but before he could move, the roof groaned, footsteps above him slow and deliberate. Dust drifted down from the ceiling fan. Then came the sound of breathing, deep vibrating inhalations that seemed to pull at the walls themselves. Something fell from the ceiling, a splinter of damp wood. Looking up, he saw it. For an instant between the slats, the slit in its head, teeth flexing inside, wet strands clinging like spider silk. He fled to the bedroom, barricading the door for hours. It paced the roof, pausing to breathe and smelling him. At some point, the noise stopped. Daniel began to hope it was gone, until the bedroom window bulged inward, not breaking, bending, as if something pressed against it from outside. He saw the faint outline of that slit, teeth just behind the glass. It breathed until the pain fogged, then slowly drew the fog back as if pulling his breath in with it. By morning, it was gone, but the frost at the end of the driveway was another trench, this one starting at the road and ending at his front steps. The following night, he fought exhaustion like a drug. He patrolled the dark cabin with his flashlight, but the sound came again, from inside the walls. It scraped and shifted toward the chimney. The fireplace flew, closed since he moved in, began to rattle. Then it burst open, and a hand slid into view, too long, too thin, the skin shifting like something swam beneath it. The fingers curled toward him in a beckoning motion. Daniel ran to the bedroom again, but the sound moved to the attic crawlspace, testing the panel in the hallway. Wet spots formed in the falling dust, condensation from breath. Then it withdrew. In the morning, he found the front door intact, but warped, bowed inward under immense pressure. A handprint was pressed into the wood, too large, too thin, fingers tapering into points. It was testing every way in. That night, Daniel sealed the cabin, nailed the windows shut, wedged locked doors, stuffed blankets into the fireplace. The lake was unnervingly still. The first sound was knocking from inside the walls, circling him. Then the roof bowed. A thick, bloody gel dripped onto the table. The attic panel exploded. Limbs poured through, bracing on walls and counters. The slit opened wide, inhaling with such force the lights flickered and the air thinned. Daniel bolted for the back door. Outside, the tree line shifted. Too many tall, thin shapes between the pines. The lake was his only escape. He crashed into the freezing water, swimming hard. On the shore, the creature stood watching. It laughed, a jagged alien rhythm. Then it stepped into the lake after him. The next thing he remembered was waking at dawn on a gravel road, barefoot and shivering. The sheriff offered to check the property, but Daniels told him to leave it. There would be nothing to find. Now in a motel 20 miles away, he stared at the bathroom door. Behind it, faintly, he could hear dripping. If anyone near the lake east of Miller's Crossing heard dragging in the night, Daniel would tell them one thing. Don't look out the window. It doesn't matter how well you lock the doors, it's already inside. From his balcony, Mark could see the street, a quiet stretch in the suburbs lit by a single streetlight, just a few feet away. The bulb cast its glow toward the road, leaving him in shadow. It had become his sanctuary. Every night before bed, he stepped out to smoke, hidden in the darkness with the bright light shielding him from view. The darkened room behind him made him invisible to any passerby. Sometimes he lingered just to listen. From that spot, he'd overheard strangers' conversations. A wife accusing her husband of cheating, teenagers plotting a prank on a teacher, and once what he was almost certain of was a drug deal. But such events were rare. The neighborhood emptied after midnight. Cars and pedestrians became scarce. It was during one of those still nights that he first saw the man. At first, Mark thought the figure was waiting for someone, but no one met people in the middle of the street. The man stood under a tree across from the house, hidden in shadow, in the thick of branches. It took Mark a while to spot him. He wore a trench coat and a hat like some private detective from the 1930s. The summer heat made such clothing seem absurd. That absurdity intrigued him. The man didn't move. Not a scratch, not a stretch. Minutes crawled by, maybe 10 more. Mark watched in silence, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, Mark's own legs began to ache. He shifted, raised his arms to stretch, almost like waving across the street. The man lifted one hand, slowly, and pointed directly at him. Mark froze. He couldn't be seen in this darkness, not with the light behind him, but the timing was too precise to be coincidence. The urge to wave back passed quickly. A quieter voice in his head told him to go to bed. He tiptoed inside, shut the balcony door, and tried to sleep. He failed. The next day, life's routine pushed the memory away until evening, when the craving for a cigarette returned. So did the thought of the man. He stepped onto the balcony without lighting up. The man was there again. Same stance, same shadows. Mark waited a few minutes, then deliberately waved. Again, the man slowly raised his hand and pointed. This time, Mark didn't hide his reaction. He bolted inside for a flashlight. But when he returned seconds later, the man was gone. The street was empty. That night, he didn't sleep at all. The unease festered through the following day, clouding his focus. By evening, he'd had enough. He waited in darkness for the figure to appear. When he did, he pulled out his phone and called 911. "There's a man across from my house just staring," Mark told the dispatcher, making sure the words carried toward the street. "He hasn't done anything, but he makes me feel uneasy." "How long has he been there?" the voice asked. "This is the third night in a row." The operator told him to stay inside. Officers were on the way. Mark kept his eyes fixed on the shadow. The man didn't move, not even at the mention of the police. From the corner of his vision, Mark saw a vehicle approaching. No flashlights, but unmistakably a police car. Relief flickered through him. He looked back across the street. The man was gone. Panic hit hard. The sidewalks in both directions were empty. The approaching officers would have seen anyone walking away. Mark went outside to meet them, recounting the events of the past 3 nights. Whether it was his trembling hands or his tone, the officers seemed to take him seriously. They told him to call again if the man returned, and promised to sweep the area. Inside, Mark locked the doors twice over. He skipped his evening cigarette. Lying in bed, adrenaline kept him wide-eyed. 2 nights without sleep left him restless and tense. He rolled onto his side, facing the mirror opposite the window. In the reflection, framed perfectly by the balcony door, stood a man in a trench coat and a hat.